that we do have a field here on Tumulus, and which we have. So again, I'm measuring something that is about 3 times 28 kilohertz, and this reminds me of a triple helix. So a triple DNA string, really. Now here on the top we know it comes straight up, but there's a rotation to it, and there's an angle within that rotation. We see a very special pattern of energy contraction, and that's a non-linear field. So far it seems that the pyramids are working like one big non-linear magnet. I see all these lines, this pattern here, where you have the great force coming from underneath, and then one beam coming out. I can see the contraction of the field coming up here, and I can see the field contract around the magnet and then leave as a beam. At least I am. I'm always coming back to the ether, because the natural flow of energy, how does energy wants to flow? Really? What the fuck?
Yeah, I'm ready.
There we go.
Yeah,
there we go. But what is that? So that's the signal. That's cool, but that came regularly, and that is not 50 hertz. And it came like a heartbeat. So I don't know that, and I have to do the old math. Good old math to calculate the frequency of this. Clearly see that the stones have been liquefied. It's like if you liquefy the stones without heat, but with electromagnetic frequencies, very, very high frequencies and scalar waves. You can actually levitate material and make it jellificate or liquefy to some extent. And you will see a change now. It means what I'm looking for is the direction of the field. So the field will always have a direction, and what I'm trying to do here is to see if I can measure the direction of the field. And I can see that it changes quite a lot there. Okay.
That's much. Wow, yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah. Which is directed where?
It's directed up around the pyramid, so it goes along with the side. No matter what side I'm on, it's always following the side. So what it tells me, it is going up, spiraling up. So I have a natural field, which I've been suspecting the whole time, that pyramid more or less works as one big giant magnet. So it is a natural flow of energy. And it's going up, and it's coming down, disappearing, it's becoming clear, then it's going down again. So I have the 50 hertz, so it's like there is some kind of resonance being picked up.
Jesper Johansen. This is his 3rd visit to the Bosnian pyramids. Fourth. Thank you. Usually he comes before and stays longer because he wants to find the details that usually other people missed. So let's see what we've been missing in the last few years. Here, Jesper.
First and forward, thank you so much for taking your time, showing the interest, coming here tonight. Secondly, thank you so much to Dr. Osmananik for giving me this opportunity to speak here tonight. When I received the invitation, and I realized it included a presentation, I quite fast realized that I was facing a huge challenge. And the huge challenge is not about showing my findings, my work. It is more about making you understand my thoughts. This is what troubles me. So I sat down and gave it some thoughts, and I realized that I had to divide this presentation up into 2. The first part of this presentation will be to establish a perspective, actually trying to make you see things from my point of view, what it is I see when I look at the pyramids, the stones, the concretes, when I do my measurements and so on. I've been studying physics and quantum physics, astrophysics and so on for more than 20 years. So this is a little hard to actually present in a way that you can understand it. So to establish a perspective, let's jump back exactly to the date 23 years. 23 years ago, I was living in Denmark, but I just moved to Australia. Actually, to the day I was in Australia, living down there. I was doing a HTX, an international HTX, stands for Higher Technical Exam. And I was studying math, physics, technology, and so on. And I really wanted to become an astrophysicist, because if you want to understand the biggest, you have to understand the smallest. And this fascinated me so much. When I looked to the stars, when I was doing calculations on stars, planets, orbits, and so on, this was a beautiful, beautiful sight to me. And I thought that would be my way. But then something happened one day, something that changed my life forever, or at least until now. It changed my life completely. This happened. You have to understand, I was 18 years old. I was studying physics. And at that point, I was able to do what we call a conservative joule-to-joule energy calculation. And that event made me doubt. Not upon myself, but upon others. And I expected the truth to come out, or some other kind of explanation. But it didn't. So close to 2 years later, I had to make a decision where to go with my life. Would I attend the universities and become an astrophysicist, or would I do something completely different that gave me other options here in life? I chose secondly, because nobody spoke up about this. And to me, honesty goes above everything else. So I continued in another direction, but I continued doing my own studies, because at that point, physics was my hobby. It was my passion. It was what I loved. And you should never stop doing what you love. So, of course, I didn't. I just got another job earning my money, but I continued my studies. And I decided to go back in time and try to understand how physics came about, how we developed the history of physics. What did we learn 100 years ago? What did we learn 50 years ago? Where are we today? Because if you don't know your history, you don't know who you are. So I started with Nikola Tesla. Lots of things have been said about this brilliant man. His work was, of course, about frequencies, electromagnetic phenomena, and so on. But he was also a spokesman for the ether. What is the ether? The ether is the non-atomic realm. I will come back to that a little later. But I'm still fascinated of Tesla. He was a great, great man. But so was this man. His name was Thomas Townsend Brown. And roughly 100 years ago, he discovered the correlation between electric power and gravity. He showed that he was able to manipulate gravity through electricity. And he worked with that his whole life. Even though we don't know much about him, and he's not really mentioned in schools and universities and so on, he has more or less been forgotten. But just because he's been forgotten didn't mean that I couldn't study him. So I did. I also came about this man, Victor Schauberger. Victor Schauberger spoke about the natural flow of energy. And he said, look at water. Look at how water flows. Why does water flow the way it does? It flows the way it does because it wants to flow that way. Water is free. It's free to move. Now, I also came about these men. Some of the greatest physicists we have had, apparently. And lots could be said about those. Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr, did a lot of work together, along with Planck and Schrödinger. And Bohr came up with this model in 1915. This is a model of the atomic we still use today. It says we have a nuclear, positive charged nuclear in the middle, and then we have negatively charged electrons around that nuclear. We still use this model today. Unfortunately, this model doesn't say everything. There are problems with this model. Now, at that point, it could only explain the hydrogen spectrum, and it could not really explain the bounding of atoms. And it didn't say anything about why there were fixed orbits around this nuclear. Why is there no energy when they're in orbit? Why is it only when they jump orbit there's a radiation energy? And we have the Heisenberg uncertainty principle that states it's not possible to know both the position and the velocity of an electron at the same time with the same amount of accuracy. Now, they also made this experiment. This experiment is known as the double slit experiment, or the Copenhagen experiment. And this just shows that they took a particle and fired it against a wall with two slits, and they would count the particles hitting the wall behind it. Now, this is fairly straightforward. The only problem with this was it changed. It changed when they didn't observe it. And all of a sudden, they got another result. Out there on the side, it created what we call a wave pattern. And this laid the foundation of the particle-wave dilemma. Now, it really just says a particle, a subatomic particle, known as electron, proton, neutron, photon, which is light. It can act like a particle, meaning a small ping pong ball, or it can act like a wave. Now, does nature work with duality? Not in my mind. So we have to come up with a model that actually explains why a particle can act like either a particle or a wave. Wave or particle, static or transmuting. Now, what is transmuting? Transmuting means constantly changing. And is it then static, meaning a ping pong ball? Or is it something that continuously is changing? Then I came about this man, Dr. Paul Laviolette. He has actually visited the pyramids here several times. 5 times? 5 times he has been visiting this. He's the author of this book and this theory, subquantum kinetics. And it is very much what it states here at the front. It is a system approach to physics and cosmology. This is where quantum physics come in. And I'm dreadfully sorry to talk about this. I will do it as short as I can. It is fairly heavy stuff, but I will try and come about it in a way that we can all understand it. It is not taken out of nothing, this idea. What you see here at the top, up here, is a chemical clock isolation. It is basically a, how can I perform it? It is a reaction made visible as color changes when the dye inductor ferrin is added to the solution. Now it says blue light intensity. So it means that this liquid would fluctuate, it would oscillate, and you would have light come off it. That was discussed for a long time, and from that, the model underneath looks very confusing, I know, was developed by chemists at the University of Oregon. Now, the whole idea behind that is X and B, Y and A, the things within the circles here, are what we perceive as reality. This is our world. The parts out of that is what I refer to as the ether, the non-atomic role. Dr. Paul Laviolette took this idea and worked on it, and he came up later on with a model looking like this. The Brosler model was the first model here to sort of explain or try to explain what was going on. Something was constantly changing. Now again, x and b, z, y, and 2x within the circles here is what we perceive as reality. All the other stuff we can't see. We really can't observe them because they're not a part of our atomic dimension. I would like to read from the right side here. Subquantum kinetics was partially inspired from work done on this model. However, to arrive at a model that produces a physical, realistic simulation of quantum structures, the Brosler must be modified into the three-variable reaction system known as Model G. Hence, in proposing Model G as a describer of the subquantum processes that generate physical order, subquantum kinetics takes concepts that have been developed in the well-established field of nonlinear chemical kinetics and apply them to the domain of microphysics. Now again, that sounds very, very nice or complicated, and it is. And it's my huge challenge here today to try and explain this in a way we can all understand it. Now, Dr. Paul Laviolette came up with this reaction pattern, seen in the top left, describing the model underneath as his Model G. This is the concept of subquantum kinetics. This should not be taken as full, complete truth. He even himself came up with an alternative model, seen here on the right. So this is a proposal, this is an idea, a concept, and should not be taken as complete, full truth. The complete, full truth is probably far more advanced than this, but this is something we can work with. To show it a little differently, the idea here is that G, X, and Y, that is our reality. A and B comes from what I would say lower dimension into our reality and leaves again a Z and omega on higher planes, higher dimensions. What does this mean? This means multiverse. This means that our dimension cannot stand alone. If we try to explain everything with atoms, subatomic particles, electron, neutron, protons, we cannot describe much. We can't even describe what gravity is. This is a big problem to physics. But we also have a reversed reaction. So we have something flowing one way, and we have something flowing another way through the subatomic particles. This is something that is still being discussed. So again, this is a thought, this is a proposal, not complete full truth. Let me try and explain it in a way where we can visualize it. If I take a balloon and I blow it up and I hold it, is this balloon stable? Yes, it is. It's not changing in size. Is it static? Yes, it is, because the interior of the balloon is the same. But if I now take a balloon and I install a relief valve in the back of it and I blow it up again, at some point the pressure in the balloon becomes so great that the relief valve starts to let out the air back. Now I have infinite lungs, so I keep blowing air into the balloon. The balloon stays the same size, so it's stable. But the air is flowing through the balloon, so it's not static. It is transmuting. It is constantly changing. The interior of the balloon is changing, even though the size of the balloon is not. This is the basics of transmuting wave theory. So what I wrote here, that it means that a subatomic particle is not a stable and static object. It is a stable transmuting resonant object, a standing wave in the ether, also known as a steady state dissipative structure. This is what Dr. Paul de Violette called it. If we try to look at an subatomic particle like this, on your left we have a cutaway view of a three-dimensional steady state dissipative structure, and is serving as a model of a subatomic particle. Shaded and unshaded regions indicates successive shells in which X and Y subtracts concentrations alternates in dominance, relative to their homogeneous steady state values. So this is how I'm looking at a subatomic particle. It is changing. It is etheric eon flow flowing through it all the time. So it's not static. It is changing. Everything is changing. That means that every single atom in us is changing constantly. And this is the basic understanding of wave theory. Everything is changing all the time. At the right is just a representation of positive charge and negative charge. But showing this is a proposal to why the electrons are in orbit, why they have these fixed orbits. So there is a diffusion reaction going on between the electrons in the shells that defines their different shells and orbits. It also shows why an electron must overcome a stress phase to change shell, emitting a photon. He showed that every subatomic particle has electric potential and it has a gravitational potential. And there's a correlation there, just like Thomas Townsend Brown showed. This is really not a new idea. It's a very, very old idea that we have the ether. On the right, you see the structure of a positive and negative etheric subatomic particle from 1895. So this is a very old idea. Just an idea we really don't speak about anymore for different reasons. Now, do we have any sort of proof of this? Yes, we actually have the work of Thomas Townsend Brown. On your left, there's a sketch of a model. Two discs hang up in a pendulum. They can turn around freely. When you then charge them with a very, very high voltage, unlinear, so the back is negatively charged and the front is positively charged, then we create a difference in gravity, making these two discs slowly turning around in here. So electrical power actually makes them move. We also have this. In 2002 this was publicized, and it shows more or less a capacitor. When you charge a capacitor to a very, very high voltage, and the anode has a special configuration, when you then discharge it very fast, it creates a small gravity impulse beam that can make a pendulum move. This proves that there is, again, a correlation between electrical power and gravity. So this is not completely new. We also have the Hutchison effect, something we more or less never speak about. In the 1980s, a man named John Hutchison accidentally stumbled about this. He was playing around with some Tesla coils and some other electrical instruments, and he was more or less just experimenting. He never gained control of this, so it's a phenomenon. It is just an experiment. But he clearly showed something was going on. And I would like to spend 5 minutes on this, showing you some pictures of what happened during his experiments. First we have aluminium with embedded wood. he created a field in where this happened. And it all happened with room temperature. So no high temperature here, only electromagnetic phenomena. The spot you see here in the middle, right there, that was a piece of wood lying on top of a block of aluminium. Now later on, that top block of aluminium was cut in half, so you could actually find it again. Up close, it looks like this. A piece of wood, completely embedded in the aluminium. In the bottom right corner, you see it very clearly, and you see this mark. That's from a fingernail he pushed into it to show that the wood was still soft. It wasn't burned or anything. It had just sunken in to the aluminium because the atomic structure of the aluminium got soft. It was jellificated. It was no longer complete solid. We also have aluminium with embedded steel. Now that's a kitchen knife made of stainless steel. The block was then cut to see that the knife was still intact. It has just sunken into the aluminium with room temperature. A few more pictures of this from different angles so you can see how it just sunk in. It is now a part of that block. Then we have aluminium bar jellification and separation. Now remember, he was just playing around. He did not have control of this. He actually wasn't completely sure of what he was doing. He could just observe this was happening. This piece of aluminium block was hit way too hard. So way too much energy was stored into this. And the aluminium started to vibrate apart. It came apart on its own like this, in room temperature. Up close it looks like this. The aluminium structure began to more or less fall apart. The structure within the aluminium started to break up. Nobody touched this. This happened by itself. Looking up close, we can see that something weird was going on, all the way down to an atomic level. It just more or less vibrated from apart on its own. Also with stainless steel bar. This was a normal round stainless steel bar. This is only half of it, but it came apart and jellificated completely in the one end. The end on the right was actually the middle. And I would like you to notice all these small holes and this pattern here in the surface. You might see it again later on. And this is one of the characteristics that I've seen later on around here. In the bottom of it, we see what I call pinholes. All these pinholes here in the material started to occur, also in the side. But notice how it starts from within, not from without. Brass bar. This was a normal piece of brass. Then this happened to it. Again, it happened from the middle. So the reaction started inside out, not outside in. This is quite important. Complete jellification of this object in room temperature. Looking up close, we can see how the surface again has a very peculiar pattern on it. The brass more or less liquefied. Normally, this cannot happen. It takes heat. But here, there was no heat. Only electromagnetic frequencies. Nothing else. Aluminium bar with embedded penny. He tried a lot of different things, and I'm not going to show everything here today. I'll just give you some examples. This penny was on the top of this aluminium bar at one point, until the aluminium started to break apart and jellificate. Then it sunk in. This is the part in the middle. This is the middle part of the aluminium bar. and you see how it got completely embedded within the aluminium. On the side was another penny. Out there the effect wasn't as hard. So here the penny just sunk in a little bit and left a mark in the aluminium. So the effect was highest in the middle and then worked itself out. Looking like this, you can clearly see up at the top, you have the penny mark here, and you have the other penny here in the middle. The effect started from within. These are all different examples of what I've just shown in the Hutchison effect. A little more of them. And this is how atoms can be vibrated from each other. But something else happened too. Anti-gravity effects. The Hutchison effect is created with extreme high voltage and extreme high frequency. More or less the same as Thomas Townsend Brown's work. So it seemed that we can perhaps affect gravity using electromagnetic phenomena. How do we then see this in the pyramids? And how did I end up here in Visoko coming from subquantum kinetics?
If you like this video, hit the like and subscribe to the channel, because it's the best way to support our work.
That explanation is quite clear. That's why. I saw these pictures and I got so intrigued. And I heard the rumor about this energy beam coming out from the top of the pyramid. At that point, that was just a rumor for me. Somebody said it was true, somebody said it was false, and so on. I'm the kind of guy that really don't trust rumors, but I trust myself. So at one point, I just threw my stuff in the car. I came down here, and I wanted to measure that beam myself. I wanted to establish, is it true or is it false? And so I did. To begin with, I didn't succeed completely. I didn't know how to measure it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how it was shaped and so on. But eventually, it turned out that I could actually see something. So there was some energy. And then I started to move on thinking, how can this energy be created? Why does this energy beam come up from the top of the pyramid? How does it function? Well, what could I do? Really? I was standing on the top of the pyramid, so the first thing I could do was look at the ground. I could look at the concrete, I could look at the stones, pick them up in my hand, look at them, turn them around and so on. And that made me start analyzing the concrete layers. And this is really where the fun begins. I've learned a lot since I came here the first time. I didn't even know there were different layers in the concrete. I knew nothing about how it was constructed, how it looked like, and so on. So I just started to look around. Now, before I go any further, I would like to plead guilty. I'm guilty of borrowing without permission, and I'm sorry for that. Please don't do like I. But if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't be able to show you this tonight. And I hope one day I can return all the things that I have borrowed, because they do not belong to me. They belong here, and they belong to the world. The world deserves to see it. But I had to borrow a little bit, so I can investigate more. Now, on top of the Pyramid of the Moon, we find these tiles. Right underneath them, we find the first concrete layer made of clay and very fine sand. At the bottom of this piece, we see the transition to the second layer, and there we start to see gravel, small pebbles, stones, and so on. And the concrete gradually grow more and more rough. Concrete layer number 2 looks like this, more or less. But there's a lot of crystal in here. That was one of the first things I noticed. It contains crystals. Maybe that was just a natural part because there was a lot of crystals present here. I didn't know, but it made me think, because crystals and electromagnetic, we use that today. Electromagnetic has an effect on crystals. So maybe it wasn't completely by accident that all these crystals were there. When we then look at underneath that, we see the transition to the third layer. Again, more rough. This is the third layer of the concrete. To my knowledge, this is my own studies. So this is what I define as layer number 3. I might be wrong, I might be right. This is actually my favorite layer. It is so beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. But I couldn't figure out, how was it stuck together? There wasn't any clear signs on how was this put together. I heard that clay was the binder. But in my mind, clay is not a good binder. So how could this be? I heard that this concrete was 50% harder than the concrete we can produce today, and it absorbs a lot less water. But clay is soft, and clay wants to absorb water. So something had to be wrong in my mind. There had to be another explanation of this. This is just an example of layer 3. These are stones that I picked off the ground around. I just simply found them on the ground, picked them up, looked at them, and I investigated them as good as I could. On the right, you see crystal. That's a big, nice crystal stone sitting right there. And the crystal just continues. Then, in the layer underneath that, I found something different, something strange. Up at the top left corner, I see an unknown structure. So far I haven't analyzed this, so to me it's still an unknown structure. I will in the future though, because I have an idea of what it might be, but I'm not sure yet. Coming down to layer number 5, I saw something odd. In the middle here, in the concrete, you see a black granite stone, but there's a pattern in it. There's just like lumps in it. And I thought to myself, that looks strange. That looks very strange. How do you make these lumps into a granite stone? That should not be possible. So that made me analyze the stones. And I'm using this picture because this is one of my true favorite stones. This is an example of what happens when everything goes wrong. There's a lot of information in this stone, and I will come back to that a little later when we have established a little more perspective. One of the very first stones I found was this. That's a marble stone, and it has a color. Now that's quite natural, but when a stone has a color, it means it hasn't been hot. So this stone has never been molten. This stone has never been so hot that it started to get soft. But look at the surface. There are these lumps in here. The lighter part, that's part of the clay. That's just remains of clay around. But the surface looks very strange. The stone has rounded edges, so it means that at some point it has been polished by water before it ended up in the concrete. But these lumps here, what made those? How can this surface look like this? To me it looked like it was a piece of clay, and you had more or less pushed pebbles into the surface of the clay. But this is a marble stone. So how did that happen? If we look across this stone, from left to right, you see that the two ends of this stone looks a little bit different from the rest of the stone. They have been more affected, more heavily affected. That gives us a direction over the stone. I had the stone cut in half because I wanted to examine the interior of the stone, and I will show you that later. But if we start by looking at the stone at the end, it looks like this. there are pebbles stuck in the surface. There's different types of sandstone and limestone and so on stuck in the surface. Right there in the middle, you see a pebble, a stone, pushed into the surface. Right next to it you see a hole where another stone have been sitting. And we can actually count between 15 to 20 small pieces of different stone stuck in the surface. Up here we have a stone completely embedded in the surface. But they all have color to them. These stones have never been hot. These stones have not been molten. Now, looking at it from the other end doesn't make it better. If you look in the bottom, there's a big mark down here from stone. Big round nice stone sitting there. Up here we still have them embedded. Piece of granite stone sitting there, piece of crystal stone sitting there. All over the place we have different stones sitting in the surface. How can this be? Most of the stones here have rounded edges, so they have been polished by water, and so has the marble stone here. But look at all these marks, all these different imprints in the stone. That to me was not natural in any way. Now this next stone really made me confused. Just try and have a look at it. Does a stone normally look like this? We have pieces of limestone pushed into the surface all around. And if you look up in the top, up here, we have a marble stone completely fused into it. But there's a lot of them, and they all have a color. These stones have not been molted. We also have something else here. These brown spots here. This is iron oxide. How did iron oxide end up here? This is actually 98% pure iron oxide. How did that end up there? And if you see, I know it's a little hard to see, but there are spots here. This spot here, here, over here, and there are several more on the other side you will see on the next slide. Those small spots looks like small pieces of crystal of some kind. So I had them analyzed. And these small crystallized droplets, they contain of about 80 to 90% calcium and 10 to 20% iron. I have no explanation yet on how that exactly happened, but I can clearly see that these stones have been soft somehow. If we zoom in on the top, it looks like this. And then here you can clearly see that there's no room between the marble stone and the granite stone. It is completely embedded in each other. Now if I just go back, there's a thing to the surface. In some places you see that it's more like white. And when you look up very close to this, it's like the surface is very, very rough. Like it has been vibrating or boiling. But this stone also has rounded edges. So if it has been polished by water, how can the surface there still be rough? How can it still be like vibrating surface? Looking at it from the other side really doesn't make the picture any better. We see the same thing. Stones embedded within the big stone. Limestone, I should mention, is much softer than granite stone. So how can we push a limestone into a granite stone? If we look at the big limestone sitting here, and we look at it directly, it looks like this. The limestone has rounded edges, so it has been polished by water. And if I zoom into it, you can see it clearer. Looks like this. The limestone has just been pushed down into the granite stone very softly, without breaking. how can this be? If not, it was soft. This stone to me was clearly soft. Otherwise, it wouldn't allow a softer limestone to penetrate the surface. So this, in my mind, cannot be natural. When you have a rounded surface on a limestone pushed into a granite stone, that is not natural. Now this is the other side, and here you really see the droplets. All these small droplets here is crystallized calcium and iron. And Forza Technology in Denmark, who made the test for me, had absolutely no explanation of what that was. They could only say it consisted of 80 to 90% calcium and 10 to 20% iron oxide. But how it came into that shape, no explanation. We also see the droplets on other stones. Here they are much more clear and visible. Same thing, we have no idea really how it ended up there. Now, I should mention, calcium and iron comes naturally from the clay. The clay used in the concrete contains iron and calcium, but only in very low levels. There are more calcium than iron, but iron oxide is naturally present in the clay. But not like this. On the surface of this stone here is again 98% pure iron oxide. How does that come about? How does iron oxide end up in lumps like that on a stone, in the concrete, on the pyramids? But we also see another thing. You see those small holes? If I zoom in, it's very easy to see. The stone is penetrated with small pinholes. How did that come about? Natural erosion? I don't think so. You see any resemblance here? I'm showing this so it perhaps can be a little more obvious that energy was stored in this stone. A little too much over the edge. And then these pinholes started to erode, to come out. Side doesn't really make it any better. Here we see iron oxide in clumps lying all around. But we also see this. This is another piece I haven't examined yet, but several people agreeing that it looks like organic material. So someday in the future, I hope I will be able to carbon-14 date this, and we can get another dating of when this happened. Again, another example, a stone from the concrete with a piece of pure iron oxide sitting on it. If iron oxide came from the clay, how did it end up in these portions, in these lumps? The concentration has gathered around. This is how it looks like when this picture is taken up by the excavations in the Pyramid of the Sun. And this is actually iron oxide sitting on the stones. Around here we see spots of clear iron oxide. Again, how did it end up like that in clumps? If it came from the clay in low concentrations, 1 to 2%, how did it end up there in these big concentrations? Now this is really one of my favorites. This is a black granite stone with rounded edges. And look at the surface of the stone. It looks like the crust has broken up. You see all these lines. It's like the crust just broke up. And in the middle, you have this whitish surface, extremely rough. But we also see the smoothness here. This comes from water. So the water has been polishing this stone. And then afterward, this happened. And look up in the top. This one is very intriguing. And also this. Here we have a beautiful other grandstone fused into it. But if we take a look at that limestone sitting up there, looks like that. There's an edge. The limestone somehow sunk into it. Maybe a piece of it broke off afterwards. But no matter what, it left a clear edge around here. So this must have happened after the stone got polished by water. Otherwise, that would have been completely gone. Looking from the other side, it's the same thing. The crust has completely broken off, and we have areas where it's smooth, and we have areas where it's more rough. And we have a big, nice, beautiful piece of crystal stone sitting right in the middle, completely embedded in the surface. But the crystal also has rounded edges. So both stones had to be polished by water before they ended up like that. And in the top we see a sandstone, a marble stone, and other stones. But look up to the left corner, up here. That is what I call a crater hole. Looking like that. Another object, another stone, penetrated the surface here. Later it fell out, whatever, got hit out, but it left a crater hole. You clearly see how the edges of the granite stone has given away for that object penetrating it. And there in the middle, that's a sandstone. I'm not a geologist. I'm not an expert in stone. But I do know a sandstone is much, much younger than a granite stone. And if that sandstone was sitting in the granite stone while it was polished by water, it would have been completely gone. It should not be there. In my personal opinion, this cannot happen naturally. This can only happen by artificial technology. Now, this stone here is a big gray marble stone. And look at this beauty sitting right there. Beautiful limestone. And you even see the corner of the marble stone hanging out and over the limestone. We see the clear lines in between, so it's two different stones. And the limestone more or less has again been pushed into the marble stone. Looking at it from the end doesn't make it any better. On the right side here we have the limestone, but we have other types of stones sitting here and down here and here, piece of granite stone, and so on. This reddish area here tested positive for iron oxide. So iron oxide somehow came into the marble stone and got embedded, fused into the marble stone. And look right underneath it. Again, we see pinholes. Here we have small pinholes in this area. And look at all these beautiful lines in between. These are different stones pushed into the surface. These stones were not created like this. Now again here, we have a granite stone. At the top, we see a smooth surface, but we also see the same lines, like the crust almost gave in. And then we see all these pinholes. We see all these marks from other stones pushed into it. It's a little hard to see on these pictures, but this stone actually also has a direction across it. It looks like the field, I'm saying it, had a direction according to the stone. From the other side it's the same. We see all these small holes, so on, and we see a smooth surface underneath. We have the clay, remaining of the clay from the concrete, and we have different lines going through the stone. You can almost see the direction here. It seems that something, and it, oh, sorry. It seems that I would call it an invisible force sort of dragged the stone out. See how it has a direction up towards the left corner? I don't believe a stone naturally is made like this, especially not if it's being polished by water. And we still have the lines going across the stones, multiple places. Now here it becomes obvious. It's a beautiful little round marble stone. And right in the middle, we have a granite stone just pushed into it. The granite stone, again, has rounded edges, smooth surface, and again that whitish color to the surface where it's really rough. We have the same thing in the marble stone. And we have all these small lumps from other pebbles and stone pushed into it. In front here, there's a small piece of granite stone again, another stone here, and some type of stone embedded right in front of that granite stone. That black granite stone there and that little stone there reminded me of something else. One evening I was sitting like, almost looks like a tombstone. Looks like a tombstone sitting out of that stone there. But calling it a tombstone, that sounds a little dark. So I couldn't help myself. I called it the tombstone of particle physics. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. But looking at it from the other end, it's the same. Down in the left corner, another stone is just clearly sticking out of it. This stone has clearly been soft. Otherwise, this couldn't happen. And again, remind yourself, all the stone here has color. They have never been hot. They have never been molted. But they have clearly been soft. So imagine all the stones here are soft as clay. You push them together and they interlock in the surface. That's the real binder. The stones themselves is the binder. Wow. The clay is an indirect binder. And when the clay contains iron oxide and calcium, I'm not a chemist, but that gives ground for catalysating chemistry effects. It means that not only can the stones interlock in the surface, the clay and the components within the clay can also make the stones atomically interlock in the surface. That's probably why it's so hard. Wow. Here we have the same. I believe it's more or less clear to everybody by now that we cannot say that this stone hasn't been soft. All the stones sitting here has rounded edges, so before they ended up there, they were polished by water. Here it becomes too obvious. This is a marble stone. All these marks from other stones, and here you have a beautiful crystal stone with rounded edges. But look, between the marble stone and the crystal stone, look how they're just glued together. Right. Is there any other explanation? Yes. Maybe? I don't know. But in my mind, this reminds me that these stones have been soft.
It's also obvious that those holes have contained these other types of rocks, and they fell away probably because of the water erosion or something.
Yes.
In the meantime.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is absolutely obvious. Now this stone, again, this is one of the end. So the middle part of the stone is not that heavily affected, but this is the end of the stone, and we have multiple holes, multiple stones sitting within it. The other end looks like this. Holes, pinholes, marks from other stones. And that stone is completely embedded. Yeah. Completely.
I have hundreds of these.
I'm sorry?
I have hundreds of these. fulgurites.
Now it starts to, there's another thing to it. If you look at this stone here, one side has been heavily affected and the other side here has another color. It changes color over here. It more or less looks like one side of the stone was more affected than the other. And again we see the same thing. Holes, stones embedded. This one is quite obvious too. Quite beautiful, with this little crystal stone sitting right there sticking out. The main stone has rounded edges, and this, I believe, is some type of granite stone. Has not, but also has these crystal lines. Here we have the line going through both stones. But try to look up at the top. And the top of the stone up here looks like this. Here the surface has started to come apart almost completely. In my mind, this was too heavily affected. So the surface of the stone began to break up. Something we see on this. This is actually the stone itself falling apart. In this area here, the atomic structure of the stone is just falling apart. We see pinholes, we see all the characteristics, but we see the stone here completely falling apart. Looking up close, it looks like something I've never seen before. And we have lots of iron oxide sitting on it as well. But again, this is only one side of the stone. Underneath here, you see how it's falling apart, and then it changes color. And it's not as heavily affected as the other side. This stone is also very special. It is more or less square. It has rounded edges. And it has all these marks. But then there's this band in between. This band tested positive for iron oxide as well. Deep within it, actually. This one is still a puzzle to me. The surface of this stone is extremely rough. It looks like it was dipped in acid. So to me it doesn't look like normal erosion. And then you have these crystal lines here going through it. But then we have some, I would call it baked clay or something, embedded within the crystal. That, by the way, tested positive for iron oxide as well. And we have multiple stones embedded within the crystal. Looking at it from the front, it looks like this. And in the surface of the crystal we have sand, small pieces of sand pushed into the crystal. And we can almost see, I would call it liquefy. To me, it looks like all this was liquefied somehow. Other than that, how could all these stones be embedded within this crystal? Looks like an oyster that opened up. Looks like a complete mess, actually. Here we have crystal lines going through it all over, while we have stones embedded in it. I'm not a geologist, so I'm just asking the question. How does this come about?
Have you asked one geologist
Yes, I have.
those questions?
Yes, I have.
Did he answer them?
No. So far, I haven't met a geologist who has been willing to say anything about these stones at all. So I still haven't got an answer.
The other fulgurites.
Underneath it looks like this. Another layer of the crystals. Now, this stone, this picture, I'm sorry for the quality of this picture, but I just found this one a couple of days ago. On the right here, we see the crystal. The crystal lines is vertical. And when I then turn it around, I see this, and I'm sorry for the quality of the picture. It was taken quite fast, and it's only a few days old. But here, we see the crystal being bent as an S shape. When I hold it in my hand, I can clearly see the crystal lines bending like an S shape. How do you bend a crystal? Again, it hasn't been hot. If the crystal was heated up, it would shatter. So it hasn't been hot. And how do you bend a crystal?
When it's in the liquid crystal phase.
Now I'm coming back to this, because in this I see so much. This is cut, so this is the interior of the stone. Over here we see this stone sitting here is the one we see sitting down here. Please notice the surface around the embedded red stone here. The surface has started to break up completely. It's like vibrating apart, it's boiling. And we have lots of different things in this one. Here, there's another stone, or I would call it a droplet of a stone, just pushed into it, just fell into it. But the crystal lines go through them. When we look at the interior, we see lines in between. So it's not the same stone. Up here in this area, we see the same lines. And I'm just zooming in. We see the lines in between here. So it's clearly different pieces of stone. But look at this. There's no line underneath here. This little spike here grew out of the stone. It is the stone itself that has done this. There's no breaking line here. There's no line whatsoever. This is the stone coming apart. Looking up close, we can start really seeing some beautiful details. How does this come about? This surface, broken, boiling, vibrating surface, next to this more or less polished surface. And this stone here has again the same smooth, polished surface. So how does this come about, if not with technology? Looking at it from the other side, it doesn't really make it any better. But we see multiple of these small spikes sitting here, around the edges, all the way down here. It's quite hard to see on the picture, but I have all the stones with me. So anybody is in doubt can come up and visual and see the stones from themselves, and they can clearly see all these small spikes coming out from this stone. No geologist has so far been able to explain what this is, how it came about, and they're not willing to write anything at all. Right in the middle there, I know this is very hard to see on the picture, but in reality it's quite easy to see this other stone just pushed in, just like all the others. I believe this was a gray stone and a red stone smacked together while they were gelificated. But we have though confirmed that the gray stone over here and the one on the left side is the one and same stone. It's the same stone. Something just came in the middle. The other side, just as confusing. But there's still more, because I had to clean the stone for you to see this. When I found this stone, it was covered in something else. You see it on the right side. That again is pure iron oxide. And if you look closely to it, it more or less looks like it grew out of the stone. I can't say how, really, but it's pure iron oxide coming out of the stone, growing out of the stone. So of course, I had the stone analyzed and tested in this area here in the middle. This is from the report made by Forza Technology. You can see it's from March this year. And this is the two pieces of stone they examined. This is the examined area. You see up close? Beautiful picture, really. And this is the result. Inside this stone, we find areas where we have iron oxide, 51.9% iron oxide. We find calcium phosphate, 46%. We find aluminium silicate, nearly 20%. And again, iron oxide, 54.3%. Calcium carbonate. Now, FOSA, of course, don't want to make any conclusions. They only test what I'm asking them to test. But I did not ask them to write the bottom line. Calcium phosphate is sometimes used to preserve marble. I don't know why they wrote that. I didn't ask them to write that, but they did. Maybe he suspected something and he wanted to give me a hint. I also had the other one examined, and inside of it we found these small areas, inclusions, sitting up here. And the result, underneath here, we found a lot of calcium again. But if the calcium comes from the clay, how did it end up inside the marble stone?
Lightning.
I'm just asking. Now, the 22nd of August, only about, 1.5 weeks ago, I had this test done. Barely in time. I just made it. This test is not very precise, or they didn't want to give off a percentage. Because to give off a percentage number means you have to analyze everything. And we didn't have time for that. So this is what we call a PMI test, or an XRF. PMI stands for Periodic Mass Index. It's a non-destructive test where we use radiation to analyze the spectrum of the different materials. But long story short, we found iron and calcium in everything. PSC stands for Pyramid Sun Concrete. So all this is from the pyramid of the sun. And I have from layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, and then several tests on level 3. Everything contained iron oxide and calcium. The iron oxide goes from 2% to 98%. I saw the numbers, but they're not officially, and they could not write a conclusion on the percentage number. Then we had to analyze it with SEM tests and much more. So this was because of lack of time. From the Dragon Pyramid, PDC, Pyramid Dragon Concrete, we saw the same thing. Everything has tested positive for iron oxide and calcium, both inside and outside of the stones and the concrete. Now this brings me to the next part. Majority of the stones, not all, but majority of the stones that I found that was heavily affected was found very close to this area. This is a concrete slab. And I believe we're down in layer 3 or 4, I'm not sure, but the top layers has broken off, so we're down in the middle. And in the middle of the picture you see some anomalies. If I zoom in on it, looks like that. Right there. We only have a quarter of that left. Half of it, more half, broke off. If I zoom in a little more, like that, it looks like this. Embedded within the concrete, we find what I call an eggshell. And I did not know, and I probably still don't know what it truly is. I have an idea. If this concrete was really levitated off with wave-based technology, there's a center, just like you saw with the Hutchison effect. The effect comes from inside out, not outside in. So there's a center to the field. Now I'm playing around with the idea. John Hutchison did not have control of this effect. He was just experimenting. But if you master the technique completely, we call it a technology. Eggshells within eggshells. Half of it has been broken off, but it's clearly an anomaly. Actually, I found another, so I found 2 this week. And here the center is still intact. Only the outer layers has broken off. So the interior of this center is still whole. I hope one day I can examine this. But there's a little bit more. You all seen these pictures before? One day, last year, I was out walking with some friends. We wanted to go up on the Temple of Mother Earth. So we climbed up from the west side, from this point here. And at that point I wasn't really paying attention that we were going up to exact this point. That was not in my mind. That was just only something I came about later. Halfway up, we came up to this rock, cliff sticking out. And it's pretty steep. Everybody was more or less a little bit exhausted, so we took a break. While we took that break, my good friend Bowder all of a sudden pointed down and said, "Hey, what's that?" Everybody looked, going, "What do you mean?" And he pointed to this rock. You see that right in the middle? That's a triangled hole in a rock on the side of Temple of Mother Earth. Zooming in a little more, it looks like this. Perfect triangled hole with rounded edges. The hole is about 20 centimeters deep, and the surface down in it is completely nice and smooth. How did that come about? So that day we finished our walk. I just took a couple of pictures, and still it intrigued me. So I came back later, and with some simple tools, well, very simple tools, because this is actually my girlfriend's selfie stick. But that was the only thing I had that would fit inside the hole. So I stole her selfie stick and I stuffed it into the hole so I could measure the angle. The picture here might be a little off, I'm sorry, but I measured the angle to 52 degrees up. 52 degrees. Haven't we heard that angle before? Isn't that the side of the pyramid? Oh, okay. But it also has a direction. The yellow line is the direction. Is that intentionally? Now, if nobody has touched that rock for at least 10,000 years, could ice, snow, weather, and so on have pushed a little bit to that rock? In my mind, yes. So 15,000 years ago, or how, whatever, could it be that that hole had the precise direction of that line coming across the top of the Love Pyramid and Sun Pyramid? I believe so. This is not random, at least not in my mind. Now, that hole there, to me, when I was asked, what do you think about this hole? My only answer was really, off the top of my head, well, maybe there was an antenna sitting there, some kind of instrument. If the energy is being guided around in this complex, and the pyramids are not working one by one, but they're all working together, would it be natural to put some kind of an instrument or an antenna or something like that in that hole to guide the energy? Possibly. Could be. Something I'm planning to look into a little more later on. Now this is just a sketch, so please don't take it too literally, because it's just a sketch. My drawing ability is not that great. But I believe we should look at the energy flow around a pyramid, something like that. Because this is what I see if I take a non-linear magnet. Let me rephrase that. A normal magnet has a north and a south pole, equal size. But if I shape a magnet as a pyramid, so I have a large south pole in the bottom and a very small north pole in the top, the field changes from a toroidal field into that. Meaning, if I have a pyramid-shaped magnet, it gives off an energy beam from the North Pole, just like we see here on the pyramids. So maybe now you understand why I'm trying to detect the direction of the field. Because it is my belief that the fields around the pyramids has the same shape as if I have a pyramid-shaped magnet. If this is true, I don't need to come here anymore. I can just create small pyramid-shaped magnets in the right sizes, put them together, and see what happens. I don't know. This is just an idea. But I do believe that the fields are the same. And all my measurements so far has pointed in this direction. Of course, I need to come back with highly sophisticated equipment, extremely sensitive and so on, so I can establish for sure that this is the case. That takes time, a lot of time and a lot of money. So it's not something I can do in just a few days.
The Gorans and my measurements, what I showed before, my sinus wave, which is transforming to fog upstairs, and vice versa, and the intensity of that. Sorry.
That's okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I promise you we're almost done. I don't have a picture of a pyramid-shaped magnet under a ferrocell, but I would love to show you this picture. This picture is a ferrocell. So we have a ring magnet here. And the ferrocell really just consists of two glass plates with oil in between, with a ferrofluid. So when we put a magnet under it, and we have LED lights coming in from the side, we can visualize the magnetic field. So the magnetic field inside a ring pyramid looks like that. Isn't that beautiful?
It looks familiar.
It looks familiar and is so extremely beautiful. We also have the same field. Now, two glass plates is what we call 2D. The shape of the field is of course 3D. So you can only see around the edges here part of the field, but we can clearly see that it goes on. So if I lift the ferrocell from the magnet, you will be able to see more of this picture of the field. But this is what we see. In the middle here, that's what we call point of inertia. And lots have been said about energy and so on, but it's all about overcoming point of inertia. This is something for another evening, but it's an extremely important topic because it's something that the pyramids builders mastered. They overcome point of inertia to create this, to create free energy, to resonate all this concrete up, make the stone soft and so on. But that is another long talk for another evening. We are rid of Giza. To my knowledge, we haven't been inside the pyramids here in Bosnia, but if I assume, just saying, if I assume that the pyramids here are built with the same interior as other pyramids, here the Giza pyramid, this is what we should find, perhaps. But when I look at the Giza pyramid and I look at the interior, I see something that other people may not see. I've been speaking about resonance, frequencies, and so on. And it's only natural to me that the purpose of an object will always be a reflection of the technology used to build that object. So if the technology used to building the object is based on transmuting wave theories, then so should the purpose of the pyramids. Here they call these lines air shafts. I would call them something else. Grand Gallery here is to me a resonant chamber. And there's a mathematical pattern here.
Yes.
So if I play around with the idea, and I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just throwing up an idea. If I'm standing out here, and on these two sides here, and oh yeah, by the way, let me add one logic thing. If you want to operate an engine, you have to do it from the outside. You can't stand inside the engine, applying the fuel, operating the engine. You have to do it from the outside. So what now if I was standing there with a loudspeaker of some kind, and I would add a frequency down through this channel here. The waves of the frequency would resonate around in this chamber. And the length here is half the length here. So we have 1, 2, and coming down from here, we have all 3. So 1, 2, 3. This creates a Doppler effect. Those frequencies would then go into what they call the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber, where you would be able to add other frequencies. So you would actually be able to add 4 different frequencies, combine them together in the resonant chamber and in these 2 rooms. Wouldn't that give off an effect in the top when we have energy coming from the earth? We have this human resonance in the earth. We have flowing water underneath the pyramids. And we know we have energy coming up here, and we know we have energy coming out in the top. Nobody's operating the pyramids right now, so it's quite clear that the engine is not running, the machine is not running. And I don't know anything about the purpose, really. Is it an energy generator? Is it for healing? Is it for telecommunication? I don't know. I'm just saying I can see a pattern. And I believe this whole thing is built with frequency. And the purpose is so also for frequency. Have we then found the same type of evidence for this technology elsewhere? Yeah. All over the world. We have thousands and thousands of megalithic structures all over the world. This is from South America. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to travel down there and study all these. But I have in Denmark. Because in Denmark, we also see megalithic structures. But they're only roughly 5 to 5,500 years old. And they are made with what I call a degraded version of this technology. So this technology that somebody mastered to perfection at some point somehow got lost. And 5,000 years ago, somebody was still able to do it, but not at this level. And then, in the end, it was completely forgotten. Now that brings us up to date. This is now. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to mention this book, because it's also written by Dr. Paul Laviolette. And this confirms, this book is a walkthrough of different physical experiments done over the past 100 years, giving off a different result than we might expect. This book lays the foundation of what is known today as forbidden technology. This is one of the reasons why we actually cannot speak freely about the technology behind the pyramids. Because we are really not completely allowed. There are so much technology developed today that is buried from the people that we are not allowed to have. This technology involves free energy, anti-gravity propulsion, and much more.
Inspiration series.
In my mind, a healthy society rests on 4 things. Free information, this is what we have here. Free education, this is what I have done by not attending universities. And with free information and free education, we should get free technology, something we don't have today. And with free technology, we should have free energy. We have neither. But I hope one day we can have a society that rests on these 4 pillars. Free information, free education, free technology, and free energy. So please, ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you. Why do we always use technology to produce weapons? I hate that. We can use it for so many other things. For example, this. This is my kitchen table. As any good scientist, I'm using myself as a guinea pig. And this is my little baby. This is my toroidal coil. This coil creates a true magnetic resonant field. If you look at the screen on the oscilloscope there, the yellow line is a signal coming in, and the blue line is a signal coming out. I input this coil with 5 volts, and I can get an output of about 100 to 150 volts over an unbroken wire. This is not free energy at all, but I'm moving the energy from the coil out into the free space around it. And I tuned this coil to 28 kilohertz. So if the 28 kilohertz signal has something to do with water, and it has, because we can actually prove that quite easily, then I'm transferring the energy from the coil into the water, making the water more healthy to drink. The thing in the middle is a filter. So what I do first is I filtrate the water, so we don't have any pesticides, heavy metals, all that crap in our water. Then we have clean water. And then I energize the water with 28 kilohertz, just like here in the pyramids. So I'm actually drinking, as a guinea pig, I'm drinking my own pyramid water at home. And I hope one day I can put this for sale. I'm not the first in the world to do this. I know there's a...
It would be free.
You see, in Russia you can buy in Russia you can buy this device.
I thought
Yes.
technology
It
would be
costs
free.
maybe 150 bucks. Right.
In Germany, they have quite a large machine doing the same thing, but the machine is big as a fridge, and it uses about 500 watts. This machine can stand on a kitchen table, and it uses 1 watt, and it does the same thing. Today, everything is about saving energy, and I just saved 499 watts. This is what we should do instead of creating weapons. And ladies and gentlemen, with those words, thank you so much for your time. Right now I'm in a vertical position measuring the signal here from Tumulus. We have a lot of noise that I'm trying to cancel out, and at the moment I'm not measuring any other direction than straight up. So all vertical. If we had more time, I can start to measure the direction of the field, but right now I'm just establishing that we do have a field here on Tumulus, and which we have. So again, I'm measuring something that is about 3 times 28 kilohertz, and this reminds me of a triple helix. So a triple DNA string, really. But what is really noticeable, it works like an AC capacitor pattern. I can only say that there is some kind of a signal within the signal, and this is what I need to analyze further to understand it. And I do not have the full understanding of it yet. But I do know that if I put down the antenna in horizontal, this signal will not collapse, but it will have a much smaller amplitude. And it's the same signal I get everywhere here in Visoko. That's what I'm trying to do with this very simple measurements. Just to see, can I change the angle? Can I find the direction? And I can actually, with this very simple thing, I can find the direction of the field. Now, here on the top, we know it comes straight up, but there's a rotation to it, and there's an angle within that rotation. And this takes a long time to figure out. It's not something you just do in 15 minutes. Doing measurements here on the top, on the side, and so on, gives us an idea of what it is. And I do actually have an idea on what I'm looking at, but I haven't been able to prove it yet, because we see the same thing if we take a non-linear magnet. That means a magnet shaped as a pyramid, and we take a ferrocell or a magnetic supercell, and we view that magnet under that. We see the same thing. We see a very special pattern of energy contraction around that magnet, and that's a non-linear field, and it's the same I see here. But it's so much easier to have a little magnet like this that I can turn it around, I can measure it and so on with all my equipment in the lab. I can't do that here. So because the ferrocell is 10 times bigger than the magnet, well, you can imagine ferrocell a kilometer wide cannot be done right now, at least. So this is really what we're trying. What I'm trying to do is to establish whether it is not, or whether it is or not the same thing as we see in a non-linear magnet. But so far it seems it is. So far it seems that the pyramids are working like one big giant pyramid. Sorry. As one big magnet, a non-linear magnet. I see when the magnetic lines are there, I see all these lines, this pattern here, under a ferrocell. I can change the shape of the magnet.
So it's suspended particles of iron, right?
Yeah, it is. Yes, okay. That's a suspended particle of iron. Okay. Between two glass plates with oil.
Right. Okay.
So, but the funny thing is, the lines we see, that's where there's no magnetism.
Because they move until they find no force, right?
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. So, why does it move in between here and not along? When I did this first time, I actually suspected I would see the reversed picture. Right. But we don't. Right. We see reversed picture of what we think would be normal.
Exactly.
Yeah. And every time I
anti-magnetic field, right?
Yeah, it's anti-magnetic. So if I change the shape of the magnet, I only change the little tiny field around it. It will always go out to the same pattern and the same shape, no matter what.
Outside.
Until I make a non-linear magnet.
Yes.
Okay.
Then I change the whole field.
Yes.
As long as the two poles are the same, I have one field, one shape of the field. So a square magnet will come out to be a round field.
Right.
And I can have a triangle, I can have a whatever.
And when it's non-linear, how does it look like?
Like what we see here on the pyramids, where you have the great force coming from underneath, and then one beam coming out.
Okay.
So
that's why on the sides you see some component of
yes,
it.
Yes, and that's why I can see the contraction of the field coming up here, and I can see the field contract around the magnet, and then leave as a beam.
Right.
And that's the only type of magnet that does this.
Right. And this beam is electromagnetic, right? This is not scalar wave of some fancy nature, right?
No, this is what we assume is electromagnetic.
And the frequency you said is 3 times 28 kilohertz.
Yeah. We can measure 28 kilohertz, but I can also measure something 3 times that.
Right.
So
you have 28 kilohertz component in it as well.
Yes. And I have something that's 3 times that thing.
Like harmonic, right?
Yeah. So in my mind, and I know there's camera on it, so please don't take my word as truth. We're just playing around.
Cameras,
Yeah, we're just playing around here. But what I'm because in construction and different, I see the 120 degrees pattern. That's quite well known within structure. It is
motors.
yeah. So if I take, if I have a vertical beam, if I have one vertical beam, I can have it a pipe, and I can bend it. So, but what gives me the biggest strength? 120 degrees pattern. So if I take
Of what? 120 degrees of what?
like
Between what?
let's say this is a vertical beam, and I have 3 plates
Right.
coming up like this.
Right.
Now with that angle,
Right.
I can build the strongest pole with the minimum amount of material. So minimal construction.
Right.
That is the 128.
Right.
Yeah.
Orientation.
Yeah, and that is the same as a triple helix when you twist it. And when you twist it with the golden ratio, okay, let's play with the thought again, because when I take a pipe and I use sacred geometry in that pipe, for example, hexagon, and I push in the hexagon, the flower of life, the shape of flower of life, I push that in the pipe, and I
What
switch.
exactly you push in?
Okay, if we draw the, if I have a round pipe,
Yes.
and I take the flower of life, put on top of that, you'll see sort of the
Like
dents.
on the outside.
Yeah, from the outside, and I push in, so I have these dents in the pipe. They're hexagonal and according to the flower of life. And hang on, if I then twist the pipe like this, according to the golden ratio, I will lower the resistance in the pipe. So if I have a round, flat pipe, a round, square, straight pipe, and I push water through it, it will have a resistance. But when I put in the flower of life in the surface and I twist it according to the golden ratio, I will lower that resistance. That is Victor Schauberger. So yeah, exactly. That was his philosophy of how would water like to move. And this we can prove that way. And when I combine that with with sacred geometry and the 128 degrees, 120 degrees pattern, I get a triple helix. And I'm not sure. I'm just playing around. But I do think this is
Triple
what
helix of
electromagnetic field coming out here.
Yeah.
I've heard before people are seeing as a DNA helix coming up, but I believe it's not a double helix, it's a triple helix. But I'm not sure. This is just what I'm playing around
Do you
with.
think you can sort it out from the data you collect?
Maybe. You see some very specific angles in nature all the time, like the Fibonacci spiral. Why do we see that? Well, it works on an atomic level as well. And from the fractal pattern, it just repeats itself. So it starts actually on the subatomic particle level, which looks like that. And if we follow that pattern all the way through, we end up by getting a galaxy. And everything in between. A sunflower and so on and so on.
Tricycle.
But this is really how force comes out. How this is the natural motion of energy.
And getting back to what you wanted to say from atom level, electricity and magnetism, because this is electric field that you're measuring, but it's the magnet that's creating it. What did you want to say about the atomic origin of it?
So we're always coming back to the ether. At least I'm always coming back to the ether, because the natural flow of energy. How does energy wants to flow? Really, if I just allow it to flow freely. We do not do this today. We're using copper wires and we're forcing the energy through. Whoever built the pyramids here in the complex, it's very clear to me that they had an atomic understanding of how energy wants to flow. And this is wave theory, not particle theory. So all the pyramids are simply just allowing the energy to flow naturally.
See, they flow naturally.
Yeah. We can clearly see that the stones have been liquefied because they've been pushed into each other and fused together. I have a whole suitcase full of
They
them.
look like they're pressured in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
It's like if you liquefy the stones without heat, but with electromagnetic frequencies, very, very high frequencies and scalar waves. You can actually levitate material and make it jellificate or liquefy to some extent. And then the stones will become like clay, soft clay, So when you, normally if you have two stones, the surface will just be up like that. But here, they're interlocked into each other.
So like in Sacsayhuaman in Peru? And
Yes,
Cusco,
yes,
like that
exactly,
one.
exactly.
So this is evidence
Yes.
that were liquefied, but not with it,
Yes,
But that
yes,
could mean that
without
every-
heat.
without heat.
Without heat, they're stayed cold. So in Peru and so on, they used big stone blocks.
Yeah.
Here they use concrete. But the technology is the same. That you levitate it and you make it soft. And then you vibrate it together. No, I have a whole suitcase full of supporting evidence to this theory. That where you can see it not here, so fine here, you can't really determine the surfaces without using a microscope.
Okay.
But when you have stones, you know, the size of a fist, and you have smaller stones just pushed into it, that makes a supporting evidence, especially when I have a granite stone with rounded edges, polished by water, and then I have a sandstone, also polished by water, pushed into it. That is, I'm not a geologist, but this is impossible. You cannot have a younger sandstone, the softer sandstone, pushed into a granite stone,
Sure.
nor a limestone. And I have both. And I have many of them with color. So the limestone is still white, meaning it has never been hot. And this is what I will show tomorrow. And you will see a change now. Sorry.
You're in the way of science.
But see, we don't have a very strong, clear signal here. We'll see something different at the top.
wider now.
Yeah, but the natural, I've always seen a natural variation in the signal, and I still see that here.
Shit. Yeah.
It's hard to see, but I still see the natural variation of a signal, but it's not very clear.
Kind of very,
not very clear,
very
I
light sign.
Yeah, see, that will change. When I go up along the wall, up in 45 degrees, you'll see a change. So I'm just going to change it again to the north. Now, just by doing this, we should be able to see a change. Oh,
Yeah.
whoa, there.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Why is that? That's north. That's northwest.
Pyramid now.
See, that signal changes a lot. When I do like this,
Yes.
we can I can at least clearly see the change.
Yeah.
Here,
And
here.
then slower, yeah.
It means what I'm looking for is the direction of the field. So the field will always have a direction, and what I'm trying to do here is to see if I can measure the direction of the field, or at least just get an indication. This is not precise enough to do the angles, but it's precise enough to give me an idea of the signal, which direction the signal has. And I can see that it changes quite a lot there.
If you like this video, hit the like and subscribe to the channel because it's the best way to support our work.